Okay, it's time to commit. 2024 is the year for prioritizing yourself. Begin your new smile journey with Byte, and you could start seeing results in just 2 to 3 weeks. Just order your at-home impression kit today for only $14.95 at Byte.com. Byte clear liners are doctor-directed and delivered to your door. Treatment costs thousands less than braces, plus they offer financing options, accept eligible insurance, and you could pay with your HSA, FSA. Get 80% off your impression kit when you use code WONDERY at Byte.com. That's BYTE.com. Start your confidence journey today with Byte.
As a person with a very deep voice, I'm hired all the time for advertising campaigns. But a deep voice doesn't sell B2B, and advertising on the wrong platform doesn't sell B2B either. That's why if you're a B2B marketer, you should use LinkedIn ads. LinkedIn has the targeting capabilities to help you reach the world's largest professional audience. That's right, over 70 million decision makers all in one place. All the big wigs, then medium wigs, also small wigs who are on the path to becoming big wigs. Okay, that's enough about wigs. LinkedIn ads allows you to focus on getting your B2B message to the right people. So, does that mean you should use ads on LinkedIn instead of hiring me, the man with the deepest voice in the world? Yes. Yes, it does. Get started today and see why LinkedIn is the place to be to be. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
What is The Briefing Room? It's a behind-the-scenes look at how the criminal justice system works and the lives of the people within that system.
If you love true crime, well, these are the real people who do the job every day of making sure justice is served.
Hi, I'm Detective Dave.
I'm Detective Dan. Together we have decades of experience in local law enforcement, a profession that we think is often misunderstood.
So we're going to explore how to do it right, and we won't shy away from when it's done wrong. These are stories you'll hear nowhere else. Unique, frank, and unvarnished.
From the team that brought you Small Town Dicks, this is The Briefing Room. Episode 1 drops on August 30th.
We'll meet you in the briefing room.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.
And welcome back to Scarred for Life, the podcast where we open up old wounds by looking back at the films that scared us as kids. I'm Terry.
And I'm Mary Beth.
Each episode, our special guest brings with them a movie that traumatized them as a child.
This week, our guest is Gena Radcliffe. Gena is one half of the Kill by Kill podcast and a writer and the associate editor for The Spool. According to her newspaper, The Daily Tomato, she makes excellent pancakes, took out her own stitches with an X-Acto knife, what the fuck, and forecasted that the upcoming weekend is cloudy with a 75% chance of poop, which sounds about correct.
What do you have to say for yourself,
Welcome
Gena?
to the show, Gena.
That's a big, somebody's looked at my website. That's awesome. That doesn't happen too often.
Hey, we do our research here. So I have to ask about the stitches and the X-Acto knife, though.
God.
It's not that horrible. It's just something everybody's got that one weird bit of trivia about themselves.
That's true.
No, when I was maybe 24 or 26, I took a spill and cut open my knee and got stitches. It was the first time I'd had stitches for surgery before, but never for just hurting myself, which is surprising because I'm a very clumsy person. So it's remarkable. It took more than 20 years for me to actually have to get stitches. And at the time, I was working a lot and I couldn't fit in the time to go to a doctor to get the stitches removed and it was healed. So I'm looking at the wound and I'm like, it's like 4 or 5 stitches in my knee. And I'm like, well, how bad could it be if I just did it myself? And my then husband was, he was an artist. So he had a lot of wood carving tools and all. And among the things he had was a bunch of X-Acto knives. And I was like, exact don't know what would they use. They'd probably use a knife. I should probably use that. I'll use some rubbing alcohol. That'll work. And it's a weird sensation. I will tell you that to pull your own stitches out.
Wow.
But
Wow.
the whole time I kind of had these sort of horrifying vision of pulling on my leg unravels or something like. Like, oh no, I pulled the wrong string, and
It's sort of
Oh
like
my
the
God.
lady with her like cloth necklace around her neck, whatever. That like you can't take the
Oh my
scarf
God.
off.
my whole leg just
It's like-
falls right off. Yeah, exactly. And I was like, all right. I guess. And of course, for the next couple of weeks, I frantically look for any sign of an infection or anything like that. But no, it just ended up turning into an interesting bit of trivia.
I've never actually had stitches. I feel like I need to like knock on some wood because I've never had stitches before. I've never broken a bone.
Wow.
It sucks. I don't. I think actually the worst part is when they give you the painkiller, because they have to put it like right there, and then before that they had to clean it, and that sucks. And once the anesthetic goes to work, kind of fascinating.
Yeah, I am like horrifically terrified of needles, which is hysterical because if you've seen me in person, I have several facial piercings and I'm covered in tattoos. And for some reason, that doesn't fuck me up. But the idea of getting a shot and getting stitches makes me want to vomit. When I was younger, I hurt in between my toes doing something very stupid, and I had a panic attack because I thought I had to get stitches, and I was hyperventilating in the car. And my parents were like, "We've never seen you so upset."
Wow.
And so they glued it because it was between my toes, and the doctor was like, "Mary, if we were going to give you stitches, we'd have to break your toes. Do you want that?" And I was like, "No, I don't want you to break my toes." So, I've upset quite a few doctors with my excruciating panic about needles. So it's fun.
Wow.
And I can't. So that's like the one thing I can't watch in horror movies is needles. Like, in Saw 2, where she gets thrown into the pit of hypodermic needles?
Yeah, I've seen that clip. Oh, yes.
I had to run out of the room and I almost puked. That was what got me. That part. Not any of the other gross fucking parts. That. I had to hide in the bathroom until it was over.
It's very painful to watch, though, I have to say.
Yeah, a lot of the
Anyway.
Saw traps, like I've only seen the first one and the fourth one, but I've seen clips of some of the other ones. And I think that one seems like the most of them seem kind of really silly and over the top, but that one's just plausible enough to be horrifying.
Yeah, I liked 2 from what I can remember. I haven't watched it in a long time.
I think 2's probably the best, honestly.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Anyway, after talking about stitches and hypodermic needles.
Speaking of which, how did you get into horror, Gena?
Well, I had extremely permissive parents. So I was born in the early 70s, and my parents were pretty young when I was born. My mom was 20 and my father was 24. And they were kind of, I guess you could probably describe them as hippies, and certainly they were more into the idea of raising their kids like their peers, rather than, having a parent-child relationship. So I
gotcha.
there really were no restrictions put on what I could read, what I could watch. So, I mean, I don't mean to sound like one of those like really pretentious people who, I picked up Crime and Punishment when I was 8 and I read it from cover to cover. But I was definitely reading stuff that I probably had no business reading at the time.
Yeah.
I read The Shining, and the first time I was maybe 10. And obviously I didn't understand much of what was going on in it. I didn't understand the alcohol metaphors. I thought it was, it's just it's a spooky a haunted house story. But, my parents took me to, we also, rarely pay for a babysitter, so I would just end up going everywhere with them. And I think they took me to go see Halloween.
Oh, wow.
Which definitely made an impression, but interestingly, not quite as much of an impression as the movie we're going to talk about later. But I do remember feeling kind of vaguely uncomfortable at what was happening, and again, not really getting it, but also getting that it was bad at the same time, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But the first time I really watched something that truly, truly just, won me over for, as far as horror in general was watching American Werewolf in London.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And I was, I didn't see that in the theater. That was cable. So I would have been 11. And that was just like, yep, you know what? This is for me.
Yeah.
I love this shit. I'm sold. and it probably remains my favorite horror movie.
I'm curious if that is like a trend, because like the first like real horror movie that I saw was A Nightmare on Elm Street. And that, like, I mean, I'd seen like, 1950s, 1930s, like horror, but like something that was actually like, to me, something that was horrific was that movie. And like, that is probably one of my favorite movies, period. And it was the first real horror movie that I ever saw. So that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely informed like the way I write. I tend to, mix a lot of, bad things in with humor, and I think a lot of it starts with that. So
yeah, what do you think were some of your favorite, horror favorites growing up?
There's that. I love The Thing.
Hell yeah.
Another that was probably the first one I saw that really grossed me out too.
Yeah,
like I have a very, very distinct memory of watching it at home, and I'm pretty sure I was eating spaghetti.
Oh no!
No.
And it's like something out of a movie. You just kind of, the person sitting there, watching the TV and eating, just they just stop chewing. It's just like they look at the plate and like kind of push it away.
And spaghetti, especially, like ooh,
right. I just remember thinking, well, this is awful and it's amazing at the same time. I'm
gonna cut this out because I want to save it for when this movie gets covered. But I had a similar thing with spaghetti actually, and the Lost Boys, where they're eating the noodles and it turns into bugs. Turns into like I wouldn't eat spaghetti for years because of that. But yeah, it just came to me because we were talking about it. But I'm gonna cut this whole out because I don't want to spoil it for later episodes that we're gonna eventually. I'm assuming someone is gonna want to talk about the Lost Boys at some point.
Is the Lost Boys scary though? I mean, it's atmospheric. I don't know if I would describe it as scary.
It scared me when I watched it, but I was pretty young when I watched it. I think.
Yeah.
I think
someone had to have seen it really young, and it kind of fucked them up.
That impressionable age. Yeah.
I watched it, thought it was scary, and then watched it again. I thought they were all hot. So like,
scary hot. That's
the two genders.
Now I don't want to cut this out. Maybe I'll leave it in. Whatever. So going from being a kid to being adult, what do you think draws you to horror now?
That's a good question. It's surprisingly something I don't think about too much because I don't want to project too much of my own psychological bullshit on it. So, I mean, I mean, people do, and that's okay, but like, if I do that too much, it kind of makes me uncomfortable, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like, I'm trying to think about, when I went to go see Hereditary, I was like, okay, this movie is really bothering me. Yeah. And in a way that I can't really articulate why it's bothering me. And then I realized it's because I'm alternately drawn by and impacted by movies that have, very negative family dynamic to them.
Oh, yeah.
And that's why I tend to avoid, I try to avoid them. Like, there's 2 movies out right now, that I have not been able to bring myself to watch yet. One is a Relic. And the other one is The Dark and the Wicked.
Okay. Yes. Don't, like, they're fucking amazing, but also, like, yeah, you would probably have a hard time with that.
Yeah, and another movie, like I thought The Babadook was excellent, but like it's so evocative of what like mental illness and depression feels like.
Yeah,
that's not something I'm going to watch for fun anytime soon.
Yeah. I definitely think that Relic is definitely one of those movies that I can completely understand not wanting to watch because it was.
I want to, and I would just like that's maybe not such a good time.
You have to be in like the right headspace because like especially if you come from a family that is dealing with dementia and stuff, it's kind of a really hard watch. So I get that completely.
And then Dark and the Wicked is just fucking sad. Like there's like no headspace to be in to watch that movie. I've decided it's like such a Brian Bertino, just nihilistic. Like everything is bad. It's beautifully made, but it's just like there's nothing happy. It's just bleak.
Yeah, maybe things are better in the real world.
I was gonna say, like, really hits different in 2020 when you watch it and you're like, cool, I didn't think I could sink any deeper into the depression.
Exactly.
Boy, oh boy.
It's like, well, like, I couldn't get up off the couch, now I can't get up off the floor.
That happened to me when I watched Stark and the Wicked. I was like, do I have to move now? Like,
That seriously, it's funny because like I remember tweeting about how like bleak the film is, and then Tony Kaufman, friend of the show, he'd reached out to me in DMs and he's like, "Can you compare it to the movie? How bleak is it?" And I'm like, I mean, it's probably the bleakest movie I think I've seen in like forever. Cause like, it's so, I mean, I guess I think The Lodge is probably also another bleak film, but like,
Jesus Christ.
I would actually say this is more bleak than that one just because of the stuff that it's about, you know? But.
Yeah. Anyway.
2020, man.
Exactly. Everything's shitty.
So you take those are the kind of movies that's like still like kind of evoke a fear that maybe you felt when you were younger or still scare you, because I know we talk so much about how a lot of people, us included, are jaded by horror movies at this point, where it's like we still have emotional reactions, but they don't scare us as much. Like, do you still experience that kind of fear with horror movies? It seems like you kind of do, but is it?
I do, but it's like another one I found like you kind of got under my skin was just the remake of Suspiria,
Ooh.
and I think it's just because it was just so the imagery and it was just so unsettling. It's like, am I seeing this or am I basically just losing my mind right now?
Yeah.
Has the nervous breakdown finally commenced?
Yeah, at the ending especially, it's just like, am I in the theater still? Like, am I here? Or like, have I just been transported to like a dissociation plane?
Right, exactly. I find that they don't scare me so much anymore. It's just they disturb me, which isn't always the same thing. Like I thought Midsummer was disturbing.
Yeah.
I mean, I loved it, but it was disturbing, and I think that I've also gotten to the point now where I stop pushing certain movies on people because I know, you're not going to like this,
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of movies that I like that I won't recommend to people because I know you're not going to enjoy this at all.
That's so funny. We talked about this a couple times, but like when it was Halloween, all my coworkers like, oh, you love horror movies. What do you like? I'm like, oh God, I like weird like, I don't like fun things. I like things that make you upset. But then I have to like not pretend, but I don't want to like totally let them know how like kind of weird and deranged my tastes are. So I have to like pretend or like give them picks that are like hopefully less scary. But then I'm like, I don't know. Hopefully they don't think I'm a fucking weirdo. Like,
oh yeah, when I was a teenager, I went through a movie snob trip.
Oh yes.
And I recommended to a lot of people A Clockwork Orange.
Oh no, I went through the same phase, Gena. I was like, read the book and like watch the movie, and everyone's like, "Are you fucking okay?"
Yeah, it's like, well, I watched it. That was awful. Why would you make me watch that? I'm like, I don't know. I thought it was good,
Yeah.
So I tend to be very selective about what I recommend to people.
Ah, yes.
Like I brought up The Lighthouse to someone. And I'm like, I loved it. It's one of my favorite movies of last year. You're not gonna like it though.
I do that a lot. I'm like, I loved it, but I swear it's not for you. Like,
right.
Do you want a black and white movie about a guy yelling at a seagull and like losing his mind slowly? No? Well, that's your loss.
But there's a lot of jerking off in it. A lot of jerking off.
A lot of jism. The only thing my partner knows about that movie is the word jism, because all I do is say, I'm like terrible. I'm like, I like that movie a lot, but all I do is talk about that like a 12-year-old boy. So, I contain multitudes.
If I had its steak, I'd fuck it.
The best line in the whole movie.
It really is.
Like, the writing is just so good. Anyway.
I'm choking.
I know. But moving forward to some of your creative projects. So we talked to Patrick last week about how he saw the Kill by Kill podcast come to life. So we want to hear your story about it. How did you get involved in the project, in the podcast, and like, what's the process been like?
I mean, I would love to tell you a really super interesting story, but basically he just like reached out to me on Facebook Messenger and asked if I wanted to be on his podcast.
Yep.
We were both in the a group for the Flophouse podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I barely interacted with him that I can recall. It's kind of funny. We have a very good rapport, but we did not know each other at all before starting the podcast, and now we're like BFFs. Which is weird because I tend to be very like pretty shy and awkward in real life.
Me too.
And according to him, so is he. But we just kind of really hit it off really quickly. And now he just messaged me one night, said he had an idea for a podcast, and I actually was thinking about, because I had my own podcast years ago, like more than a decade ago, and I'd been kind of vaguely thinking about starting a new one. So it was kind of kismet that he popped up and asked about this. And I was like, yeah, sure, why not? Thinking, either he wouldn't bother following up with it, or that we would just do a couple episodes and that was that. But it's been 4.5 years now, almost.
That's crazy.
That's awesome. And I think it's so funny because I feel like a lot of podcasts are like, that's how this one started, really. Like a DM, like, hey, should we do this? And then it just happens.
Yeah,
that's it. It just happens. Sometimes
you it's better maybe to not go into stuff like this with too much planning or too much expectations, because then you run the risk of just letting everybody down. It just let's just kind of see how this goes, see how it happens.
So I know Patrick really likes the Friday the 13th series. What is your relationship to the series that you guys have covered on the show?
I vastly prefer the Nightmare on Elm Street series.
Hell yeah!
Hell yeah! Sorry, Patrick, but Gena's in the right place.
It's the superior series. I'm sorry.
I don't think that any of the Friday the 13th movies are scary. I think that they're well made for the most part. I mean, there's a certain definite drop off in quality after a point, but the first Nightmare on Elm Street is definitely one of the scariest slasher movies I've ever seen.
Completely agree.
And it gets to me in particular because for about as long as I remember, I've had sleeping problems, and I've always had very vivid dreams, and I have I occasionally get sleep paralysis.
Oh,
yeah, and that's no fun. So this kind of got to me. It doesn't make as much of an impact as it did when I first saw it, but it still gets to me. It still works. Whereas for me, Friday the 13th, they're silly and entertaining. They're not scary to me.
Yeah, same.
I agree with that too. And I watched the first two Friday the 13th to talk to Patrick, and I was like, I don't get it. I was just really I didn't know much about the whole thing. I just knew Jason Voorhees had a hockey mask, and then I was like, wait, I'm so used to Freddy having a very established aesthetic. And
from the very beginning. So Friday the 13th kind of threw me off. I mean, I think the second one especially, I think they're very well made, but like we all in agreement here, I think Nightmare on Elm Street is much more horrifying. Gena, I also had really intense dreams as a kid, and this movie got to me because of that. I was like, oh fuck, this could happen to me, because my dreams feel too goddamn real. So it's really disarming when you realize that people can put that into a film. And you're like, oh, you know what happens in my brain sometimes.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, so you also write at the Spool. How did you get involved with writing?
I've been writing as long as I can remember.
Yeah.
This is kind of my first professional assignment. I knew the editor online, and I've been writing on my own blog for a while, mostly just doing movie reviews. I reviewed a lot of old television from when I was a kid. And he just reached out to me and asked if I wanted to start reviewing for his site. And I was like, yes, I do. I would love to. And then that's kind of how it happened from there.
What do you usually write about at the Spool?
I kind of am sort of the horror person.
Okay.
Usually if I've done a lot of, stuff I've done a lot of reviews for stuff that's come out on Shudder. I did, I covered Lovecraft Country. I did, the weekly recaps for that. I got assigned to to cover the Night Stream Festival, which was this year.
Oh, cool.
So I got to see Run, which is the big movie coming out now with Sarah Paulson.
Oh yeah, that's really good.
It is good. It's quite good, and a couple very weird, kind of more more artsy than horror kind of movies, like Black Bear with Aubrey Plaza.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
Which was also a very unsettling movie.
It really was.
If you are into movies about alternate realities, and I compared it a lot to I don't know if either of you have ever seen The One I Love with Elizabeth Moss.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, that movie is so good.
It's to me it felt very similar in its flavor to that.
Cool. Okay, then I will definitely.
Christopher Abbott is just hot.
He really is hot.
I love him. I love him so much.
I agree. We're all in agreement and everything. This is great.
We're very in sync. I love it. Christopher Abbott.
I'm the third host now.
There you go.
Welcome. And actually, Gena, this is a ploy to just tell you that you're on the podcast forever now. So, sorry, Patrick, we've taken her away from you. On that note, Gena, what movie have you brought with you today to discuss?
I brought the 1979 Tobe Hooper TV movie Salem's Lot.
Do you believe a thing can be inherently evil? The Marston House, for instance.
How do you like that old house?
Needs work, but we have time.
Open the window. He commands it.
Quiet little town of Salem's Lot.
Oh, it's only all just happened since
I came here.
Well. Tried to rape me.
The vampires are creating vampires.
Hey, the thing is moving.
Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Bill!
Where are you, Benny, darling?
Mr. Barlow is on a buying trip, but the moment he arrives, you'll enjoy Mr. Barlow. And he'll enjoy you.
Salem's Lot. Salem's Lot, which is based on a novel by Stephen King, is a TV miniseries about a novelist and a young horror fan who attempt to save a small New England town which has been invaded by vampires.
That was like the easiest synopsis I could find online.
Yeah, it is. It doesn't get any more basic than that. It doesn't get any more elevator pitch than that.
It doesn't really tell you much, though.
And that's why we're here to talk about it.
Yeah. So, Gena, how old were you when you saw this? Paint us the picture. Tell us your horror story about Salem's Lot.
Well, it's very providential that we're talking about this because this is it aired on this very day.
It's so cool. I know. I saw that and sent it to Terry. I'm like, how do we keep fucking doing this? Like, we don't even know it's the anniversary, and we're recording on the anniversary, which is so cool.
Yeah, it is. I thought that was I thought that was neat myself. I was like, oh,
totally unplanned. It's one of those weird kismet things.
I'm pretty sure I watched when it was originally on, so I would have been 7.
Oh wow.
God.
Yeah. Explains so much about me now.
So you watched it. Like, do you remember the experience of watching it and like what scared you the most about it and what really got under your skin?
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, my answer is not very original. It's little Ralphie Glick hanging out in front of his window.
Yep. That makes sense.
That and the one scene that's now even scarier to me is when Mike shows up at Matt Burke's house again.
Oh, yeah.
He's in the rocking chair.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God. Yes.
And it's so spooky. And I actually rewatched it because today was a work from home day for me. I had it on while I was working. I was like, how did this get on television in 1979? Not because it's bloody or anything. It's really not. But it's really scary for what a lot of people don't realize is 70s horror much of it was very suggestive rather than shown.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm surprised how well the effects of Barlow hold up. That's a pretty creepy looking creation.
He's an early creation.
This it's genuinely unsettling. You've got dead children, and you know, I'm amazed at how much they were able to get away with.
Same. It's wild that I made a comment in one of my notes that like these are the most gentle vampires though, because like every time they go in for like a bite, it almost is like they are leaning there and then pausing for like them to cut. So like the bites are really gentle. I was like, aw, it's so sweet. He's like coming in and he's biting and he just sort of pauses.
Some of the editing is so funny in this though. Like when I think it's when the guy in the red, they're having the affair.
Fred Willard.
Young Fred Willard walks out, and all of a sudden, Barlow's like, "Ha!" And his hand is there, and it just like zooms in, very like.
I like that. I like that cut. Too.
I love it.
Like with that great stinger. That
yes. Oh, it's so good.
So you think you saw this on television when it first aired?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I do. I remember my parents being there. I think my uncle was there and probably one of my cousins. We were all just gathering around the television.
It's event programming.
Yeah, it was a two night miniseries. The funny thing is again, in rewatching it, I've watched it quite a few times. I always forget that it kind of takes a little while to get going.
Yeah,
and I'm you know, surprised that it managed to hold my attention as a 7-year-old.
That's so funny.
That was the thing I was going to ask you because Mary Beth messages me yesterday,
and I was like,
"Where's the vampires?"
No, it was so funny because I texted him like, "I'm kind of bored. Like, I feel bad saying this, but like, this is kind of boring," and I fell asleep watching it. I was also having a bad day yesterday. That's probably not the movie's fault, but still. And then as soon as I texted him, Barlow attacks Fred Willard, and I was like, "Oh shit, there's the vampire." Or was it that or Ralphie? I can't remember which one comes first.
Ralphie comes first.
I think they're roughly around the same time.
Yeah, because Straker goes to get Ralphie for him, and then Barlow goes to get Crockett. Like
that's right. And
yeah, because you got those two dudes who are like too scared to lock up the house like he told them to.
Yeah. And so I had a very similar feeling of being like, I mean, this feels very Stephen King, like very much developing these characters and relationships. And when Terry said that to me, I appreciated it more, but it definitely for a 7-year-old, like, I cannot believe it held your attention, because I would have been like, bye.
Well, have either of you ever read the book?
It's one of my favorite books.
Me too.
Oh, it's such a good book.
And it's such a faithful adaptation of
it.
Like even the changes they made to it, like the two biggest changes were they changed Barlow from like a regular looking guy, like a Nosferatu type vampire. And it was mostly because the producers didn't want them to be sexy vampires. They wanted them to be scary.
I can understand that.
And then, they basically just, they combined a couple characters.
Yeah.
Like Fred Willard's character, Larry Crockett was, not the same character who was having the affair with the guy's wife. That was a separate character.
Yeah.
I mean, and again, it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things because Fred Willard's character ends up dying anyway.
Yeah.
So,
like very unceremoniously, like he has like a pretty big role, then all of a sudden he disappears and like is gone.
Yeah,
okay.
I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed that we lost out on seeing vampire Fred Willard.
Right? Oh my god. Like, did you read the book? I'm assuming you read the book after you saw the movie, right?
Oh yeah, but not till quite a while.
Yeah.
Quite a while later, and then and yeah, it is one of my favorite. It's one of my favorite books.
I have a confession. It's one of the few Stephen King books that I've not read.
Oh, you must. It's so
I know.
You have to. It's
I
so
really wanted to read it
good.
before we recorded because I just didn't have
like
time.
If you're one of those people who thinks he really needs a more aggressive editor, read this because this is just perfect storytelling.
Yeah, it's so good. And it's his second book, I believe. Is it a second book?
Yes.
I think, yeah. And I have never seen the TV movie because I loved the book so much. And I love that book. I brought it with me. I read it in high school and I brought it with me every day to school. So it was really beat up. And I used to babysit two of my brother's friends in the mornings. Their parents were nurses and had weird shifts. So I would go over there really early to watch them in between their shifts. And I would read Salem's Lot on the couch. And it's, I got scared and they had this parakeet that they let free roam the house. I hate birds already. Like, birds are just, like, fucking terrifying to me. I don't like them. They creep me out. Like, it's just too much. This fucking parakeet, in the middle of me reading I can't even remember the part, but it was a scary part of Salem's Lot, flies onto my head and starts attacking my head.
Oh, shit.
And then wouldn't get off my back and would peck me every time I tried to move.
Oh, God.
While I was reading Salem's Lot, and, like, it's just such a weird memory, but that's what I have associated with Salem's Lot, is getting attacked by a parakeet and having to sit there in fear of both vampires and a small bird trying to attack the back of my neck.
But yeah, it's I love it. I love it. But yeah, if you are kind of burned out on vampires being like super sexual and all, like, this is the cure for that.
Yeah.
Because basically here it's treated like a disease. If anything, like, you'll probably you hit different right now.
Yeah.
Because it just spreads. It just spreads to the town. It knocked into my microphone. Goodness.
Well, and so that's interesting. I know that. Well, Terry, I want to hear about how you saw this first, but I know I have a lot of thoughts about that as, like, vampirism as contagion that I want to talk about with this movie, because I think that's really terrifying, rather than, like, one person turning people into vampires slowly. Like, this kind of really rapid turning event is really interesting to me, because it reminds me of 30 Days of Night, which is one of my all-time favorite movies.
Yeah, I like that one too.
And this feels like it borrowed quite a few, like, things from it. Obviously they're very different, but in terms of, like, a stranger comes to a town to prepare, and then things start getting kind of weird, and then these vampires appear, and while obviously 30 Days of Night is an absolute blood feast, is a very similar way, but spreading across the town and the town getting set on fire. Like, there's just an interesting kind of, I didn't realize that that's kind of a through line in horror history with movies like this, so I'm really fascinated in those kind of correlations between the two.
There's actually a lot of correlations, I think, with this movie and movies that got released afterwards.
Oh yeah,
because
this started the whole image of the vampire floating outside the window, which has been that was in The Lost Boys. It was parodied in The Simpsons.
Join us, Lisa. It's so cool. You get to stay up all night drinking blood. And if you say you're a vampire, you get a free small soda at the movies. No! No! Lisa, it's not like you have a choice here.
It started here. That's where that trope started.
Is it in Fright Night too?
Yes, it is in Fright Night.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah.
I always lump all of those movies together. I'm like, they all feel like they feed off of each other, like Fright Night, Lost Boys, and all that stuff.
The finale of Fright Night is borrowing really heavily from this movie with the house and the staircase. Like the staircase, watching the staircase sequence, and like Straker that's like all of a sudden has like superhuman strength and is lifting someone up, and he gets shot on the staircase. Like it's definitely where like Billy, the character of Billy in Fright Night gets pulled from, because it's very similar in the entirety of it, because they even go down into the cellar where in this movie, and they go in the cellar in Fright Night. Like there's definitely homages here, and
then this movie has homage to other movies, like Bill Norton going up the stairs is clearly shot like Psycho.
Oh yeah. That definitely popped in my mind too when I was watching it this time, because like that scene in Psycho is the scene that I've talked about this in the podcast, that's the scene that like terrified me as a kid when I first saw it, and like watching this now and having seen Psycho like maybe less than 6 months ago again, I was like, oh yeah, this definitely is pulling that scene.
But so Gena, we've talked a lot about like some of the inspirations and all this from Salem's Lot, but to go back to when you first saw this, like, what was the effect on you after watching this? Were there nightmares? Like, were you scared of certain things? Like, what was kind of the aftershocks of watching Salem's Lot at a young age?
Well, I feel like I was always kind of a super, imaginative kid, and sometimes could be a good and a bad thing. So it's more like, I would stay up late convinced that I could hear someone else out my window. I also got into a habit of insisting on leaving my closet door open at night before I went to sleep.
Interesting.
Yeah, so if it was closed, I wouldn't be able to see if there was anything in there.
Oh,
and,
logical.
It is logical.
Yeah, exactly. And it was kind of wild. That I also had the thing where I would, if I had to get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom or whatever, and I would get back into bed, I would stand in the middle of the floor and kind of just sort of leap into bed so my feet wouldn't be near the close enough to the side of the bed to get pulled under.
Mm-hmm.
And with the Stephen King connection, that was also the little boy in Cujo did that.
Yes,
which I thought was it was both in the book and in the movie, and I really felt that. I really
felt seen.
I really related to that.
Yeah, when I watched Cujo for the first time for the podcast, and I was like, that kid, that's me as a child. Like exactly like Terry said, I feel so seen in terms of like running into my bed like a running jump.
And it's true, like when you're a little kid, you see like that tree branch outside and it looks like fingers, and you can really just kind of you train your brain to seeing things that aren't there.
It's really wild what a kid's brain, well, any brain, but like when you're a kid especially, like the things you can trick yourself into is wild.
Totally, yeah.
Yeah. So I remember I had seen this movie as a kid.
Okay.
My dad loves vampires, loves Dracula, loves all that. So like I saw this, and okay, when I sat down to watch this again, I could not remember any scene from this movie. But then as I was starting to watch it, like it was immediate, things started coming back. Like it was almost as if like I had like ESP and I could see what was going to happen next. It's like, oh, I remember what's going to happen next. Because I remember in particular watching this again, obviously Mark's room with like his horror aesthetics, the kid, how he has like, he's doing like modeling stuff, like making models of monsters and stuff. I remember doing that as a kid. I had the Mummy, and I remember getting super glue everywhere, trying to like glue that goddamn thing together. So like there are things that started coming back as I was watching this. Of course, Ralphie floating outside of Danny's room, I think is iconic. I actually think his scene floating is a lot more effective than Danny's as an adult, when Danny is then floating outside of Mark's room.
I would agree with that. I think
that it is, but I also find it very heart-wrenching how Mark is crying. When he's driving Danny away. Just like, oh, that's so realistic.
Yeah, I don't think I was like, I read the book a while ago, so I couldn't remember like a lot of the details, but I was really surprised how touching and sad this movie was. And how many points I was just like, this is just like absolutely heartbreaking. Like this town is just literally falling apart. Like it is so sad.
Oh yeah. One of the great things, and I wish now supposedly they're making another version of it. And I keep hearing conflicting stories that it's either an adaptation of the book or an adaptation of the short story that was added to the special edition later.
Yeah.
But I would love to see a slightly longer, like maybe like a
The Outsider.
Yeah, exactly, like The Outsider, where they have a little bit more time to develop like the story of Hubie Marston and kind of more really get across the fact that this town is just dying on the vine, and I think it would. Again, to keep continuing on looping back around to the how it would hit today. I think it would really hit a different way. This town it doesn't seem to have any sort of like, we don't know what like the economy is. We don't know what anybody does for a living. It seems to be very, blue collar, just hanging on. Mm-hmm. And of course, this is a well that Stephen King has dipped from many, many, many times. Yeah. There's these characters are, quite similar in a lot of ways to characters in Needful Things and to a certain extent, it's a whole, small town where there's all these, kind of dark secrets going on. Like one of my favorite sequences in the book, because it's so creepy, it has nothing to do with vampires at all, is, this is back before, any of our times, but there used to be something called party lines.
Are you a great person? Not bad to look at, but have a hard time breaking the ice? We've got your number. Call and meet lots of new people, or just listen in. Maybe you're fresh out of a relationship and ready to meet new people. We've got your number. Call Party Line and meet up to 8 people at a time. Sick of the single scene? We've got your number.
I'm so glad I called.
Me too. I really like your laugh.
Let's do it again soon.
Call now. A lot of great people are waiting to meet you. $3 plus toll if any.
Oh, yeah.
Where you would just, you could just kind of listen in on people's phone calls.
Yep.
And it was basically the town was gossiping and like, it kind of mentions little stories about like one guy's a child molester and another one beats his wife and it's just like all this kind of gruesome stuff kind of happening under the surface. And you kind of get the idea that maybe it's not a bad thing this town gets wiped off the map by the end of the story.
Though, yeah.
I mean, because like there's not a lot of good people in it, as it turns out. Like one aspect they left out of the movie was that Susan, the hero's girlfriend, her mother,
sort of love interest,
sort of love interest, yeah. But like the mother just does not like him as she makes insinuations. Oh, one thing is, a lot of people seem to equate being a writer with being some kind of untrustworthy weirdo.
Yeah,
I mean, are they wrong? Just kidding.
That's true. No, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. But like, oh, my mom wishes I dated this other guy, the plumber. It's like who clearly has some anger management issues, but he's not a writer at least.
When you were talking about having like an overactive imagination as a kid, what this movie brought back for me, and I think it was a combination of seeing this movie and then seeing Fright Night immediately afterwards, is I have a vivid memory of asking one of my friends, because like I was never brought up with religion. I think that outside of going to a funeral or a wedding, I maybe have been in a church twice in my life for like wedding, funeral type stuff. But one of my friends was Catholic, and I remember begging him to steal some holy water for me.
Oh shit!
Because I had like this image in my head of how in this movie the holy water would glow blue and like alert you that there was vampires nearby. And so I wanted to have it because I was firmly convinced the vampires were a real thing, and I wanted to be prepared. Not for like a scary thing, like I wasn't terrified, but like I wanted to be the person that was going to save everybody. And so I needed to have holy water.
Yeah, but I wonder if like as with like Fright Night, if you don't believe, would it work or not?
Well, that's the other thing. Yeah, I never really thought about that, I guess, as a kid.
You're just like, I want to be ready and prepared for the vampire war.
I remember making like fake crosses out of like tongue depressors and stuff like the kid had. Like I had like that kind of stuff. It wasn't a tongue depressor. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I had little pieces of like stuff that I was taping together to make crosses from. Like I was Mark growing up.
That's so funny. One of my favorite parts is when he makes the crucifix out of a tongue depressor. I'm like, is that going to work? And it does. But like that scene's also really scary in the morgue. But I was kind of laughing. I was like, what? And then that moment happens. Like, you know what? That's very good. Very
I think it's also something just in a vague cross shape. I mean, remember, I don't know if you've ever seen John Carpenter's Vampires, where they just mount people on a crossbar of a tow truck. I think about that every time I see one of those style of tow trucks. I always think of John Carpenter's Vampires, which is a shame because that movie sucked.
Yeah, I've heard. I haven't seen it, but I've heard bad things, and I'm like, do I really want to waste my time?
I saw that in theaters, and I remember very little about it.
It's not good.
No.
Very bloody, but not good.
When it came out, I was like closeted at the time, but like I remember being really attracted to I forget, is it Kerr Smith? Is he in it? I can't remember which one he was in. I think he was in that one.
Speaking of being closeted.
Okay, before we get to that, I want to talk about another vivid memory that I had of this movie.
Yes.
Because I could not remember what movie this was from, and watching it this time was very like uncomfortable for me because it's the scene where Cully holds the gun up to Crockett's mouth.
Oh, yes.
It's so phallic, and it's so like mixing violence as well as like sexual assault in there.
Yes.
Because the way that he's making him, he's like, hold on to this. He's like asking him to hold it up to his face. Like he's coaxing him to do it.
Good boy. Now hold it up in front of your face. That's it. Right in front. That's it. Right in front. Careful. You move that barrel, Larry, and I'll blow you away. Good. Just hold it, Larry.
It's like it's basically like a metaphor for like assault right there.
That's interesting you say that too, because his wife was like, he broke in and raped me. Like that was her first go-to accusation, which was a choice, but whatever. But that's an interesting like way to think about that moment.
Well, the interesting thing about that, Terry, is that they filmed two versions of that scene.
And that's what I was going to get to, because in my memory, I remember him putting the gun in his mouth.
Now, open your mouth and put both barrels in. That's it. Open your mouth. Let's see all those white teeth, Larry. Yes.
Because apparently my parents had a bootleg copy of the European cut, which was shorter. It was like 112 minutes, but it had more gore into it. But I have a memory, and I thought I was misremembering it, because I actually remember Crockett putting the barrel in his mouth, and I was like doing some search online because he doesn't do that in the version that's on Shudder. And that is when I realized that it was actually in the European cut that he did that. And that's even more upsetting.
Yeah,
it's funny, and in the book, the character that, well, I think in the book it's Corey is the name of the character in the book. It's a separate character from Crockett, but basically when that happens, he shits his pants.
Oh, I would too.
Literally.
I mean, fair. Seeing this and seeing kind of like the sort of homoerotic undertones of this movie is very queer.
Yes.
And I didn't realize it until this watch, just how many characters in this are queer coded. Starting with even Ben. I think the main character is coded as a queer man.
Well, yeah, and certainly like in the book, again going back to Susan's mother, I mean literally she calls him, forgive me, she calls him a faggot, and because he's a writer. It's like it's like, okay, I guess in small town New England in the 70s, I guess somebody who was considered artsy or whatever, or not like a blue collar man, his sexuality would be suspect.
Well, and they even in the book, the movie.
What's his book about?
Well, his latest one, it's about two men.
Not one of those.
Yeah, so
right
they even include
bat.
that in they included that in the show.
The one thing that's weird is that, like, for some reason, everybody keeps dancing around what these books are about. And I'm not really, and like, implying that they're not good books. Like, there's a running gag where, oh, you're a writer. Have you read any of my books? No. or oh, I read your book. What'd you think? Oh, I don't know. I didn't finish it.
Yeah.
Like, everybody's just kind of rude in this town. And like, they don't, they sort of alternately treat him like he is, an interesting oddity and yet not to be trusted at the same time.
Yeah.
Which is funny.
You can kind of see that in the way that everyone in the movie treats him as well. Like, I even kind of not around that, but sort of like along with the sort of queer coding of it. When he's with Susan, it's kind of, they have a very awkward lack of chemistry. And she even asks him, "Are you uncomfortable with me?" And he mentions that he has a habit of avoiding questions. Like, this guy is slowly figuring out, I think, through this movie that he doesn't like women. I really do think this.
I don't know. I will say I don't know if that was Stephen King or the name of the person who adapted the screenplay slipped my mind. I don't know if that was their specific intention.
Probably not.
But I could see the takeaway from that, though. I could see with that interpretation making sense.
A lot of it has to do with when you are looking back at movies where, at its time that that the book was written, homosexuality was still considered a mental issue. So you have that aspect of it. And then you also have the idea that, like, when you look at characters, you had the Hays Code, you had all of the stuff that we were slowly coming out of, where people couldn't be overtly gay or anything queer. And so you would see the queerness as being like a villainous thing. So in this movie, with the history of the Marston house, you find out about Hubie.
Then he came here. And the young boys in the area, started to disappear. Some people suspected Huey Marston, but it was never proved.
Was basically a pedophile and a child murderer, right? Mm-hmm. So like there's that aspect of it. So you have the only overtly queer-esque character being someone that is a rapist. And then you have like the two antiquers, which antique in queer coding means gay. It just does. Like if there's a character, if there's men who are antiquing, they are queer. Even Fright Night does that in the 80s with Jerry.
Yeah, that's absolutely. They're particularly in Fright Night there because you see them you don't actually see Barlow and Straker interact with each other in this.
No, but even with Straker's conversation with the constable, you know, he's like
right.
There's that conversation where he's like, well, I'm a suspect, become a stranger and a little odd. And the constable's like, well, you know how we are here. And Straker talks about his partner, and you could take it as a business partner, but then he's like, this is our retirement. Like there's absolutely like the film is trying to say that they are at least presenting as a gay couple.
Well, and I think that they got. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. So I was like, it's so. I was thinking about like the Renfield Dracula relationship, where I know like a lot of these are based off of, and how it's evolved into this interesting way of navigating queer relationships. Because obviously, Dracula is like very queer, the book, but like, and it's become more queer with time, like in terms of adaptations and stuff. But like this whole Renfield Dracula, like master and servant dynamic has really become very queer. And I think that's really interesting. And it also has been interpreted in really interesting ways because like in Fright Night, you know, the two of them are, like you said, Gina, they're seen together. They're like interacting. They seem rather intimate. And then like, I know what Barlow looked like, but I expected him to be like a very cute old man with a mustache, like to walk in with Straker and they like matching suits just because of the way he talked about him. And like,
well, he's like, that's how he's described in the book too. Yeah. He's described as sort of European looking.
Yeah.
And then he gets younger looking as the story goes on.
Oh.
And then when they did TNT did an adaptation of it, I think I want to say 2004.
Oh yeah. Rob Lowe.
With Rob Lowe and Rutger Hauer played Barlow in it. Yeah. Like in human form.
Yeah.
It's not very good, unfortunately. But
I was gonna ask if it was. I've never seen it, but I can't imagine
some interesting casting. Like the one thing I liked, although I thought the actor who played Matt Burke in this was fine, but in the 2004 he's played by Andre Braugher.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
I'm trying to think of. What have I seen him in? I know
he's Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Yes. That's what it was.
And Donald Sutherland played Straker.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, damn! Wow.
Listen, I mean, if you want to watch for them, but it's not very good.
but
you know,
oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, I think we're gonna probably say something similar, where it's like 3 queer-coded strangers roll into town, shit starts falling apart. And it's like, again, you know, this is most likely not the intent of Stephen King or the writer, but it is really interesting, like looking at it with a queer lens now and really seeing that like not potential, I think it's pretty obvious, like way of reading the film as 3 queer characters come into town and things are going bad and they get blamed for it. I think it's a very interesting way of looking at this like vampirism as queerness and queerness as vampirism and as villainy, which I think is is like a relatively common thing in vampire films, but this one is even more fascinating because it's Straker and Barlow, but then it's oh my god, I forgot his name. Ben. And then there's Ben. So it's an interesting tension between that idea of like queerness and villainy and what it means, like kind of like antiquated visions of what queerness looks like in horror.
Divorcing the queer reading from it, there's a point where the movie almost seems to want to make kind of a connection with Ben and Straker and Barlow, because Ben talks about how he asks the question with Dr. Burke about, is it doctor? No, he's a teacher. Yeah. He's asking the teacher, he's like, so do you think, what if the house attracts evil men? And then it's like, well, why did it attract me? So if the house is attracting Straker and Barlow, and it's also attracting Ben, and then you also have like Ben having a conversation with Susan later where he's like talking about how Salem's Lot was a quiet little town, and then all has happened since I came here. And so like you have this almost like it doesn't really pursue it any further than kind of tossing it out there as a possibility.
Yeah.
But there is like a connection there where you could almost make a line from this house is drawing basically all of the queer characters to it, because you have Straker and Barlow that rent it, and Ben Mears wanted to move into that house to write about it, and eventually you have the other I would say queer character of Mark getting dragged to the house to like for revenge. So you have all of this circling around this house, and all of these characters who in one way or another are kind of queer coded if you can look at it through that lens, just converging on this house.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up Mark, because he's definitely portrayed as what we would have used to call the sensitive boy.
Oh yeah,
or the artistic boy, who's not too interested in playing sports. He wants to write plays and
he wants to write pageants.
He wants to write pageants.
He is all of the Twitter gays, like horror film Twitter gays. He is all of us.
Yeah,
he is every single one of us.
He wants to hold on to his monster collection and all, and his parents are such assholes about it.
Oh my god, yes.
The conversations that his dad have with him, if you replace like monster with gayness, like it's a conversation that a lot of like parents have had with their kid. It was uncomfortable kind of to watch, because there's like a subtext behind it where he's like,
sometimes I wonder, why you're so interested in monsters and magic. And why do you think that is, Mark?
I always have been. I can't explain it. It's the way I am.
Hello, born this way. Gee, Dad, I don't know. I like boys. Like that is.
And like his parents are having these like hushed conversations about like,
they bring in the priest.
Yeah, where he's just playing. He's playing with his models, and he didn't grieve the right way at his friend's funeral and all. It's like,
he must bring in the Catholic priest to fix him.
Yeah, and it's just like that was definitely amped up for the movie, because in the book I don't recall them being just that outwardly mean to him about his hobbies.
It's one of those things where like obviously Mark is supposed to be sort of like the young version of Ben, because they make connections to the fact that Mark wrote the pageant just like you used to write the pageant, Ben, and like there's definite connections there. And I think that once it kind of moves into the end of the film, it almost kind of is like a Call Me by Your Name, Call Me by Your Barlow, maybe, where it's like an older man and like a 19-year-old boy have now like absconded from the town.
And they're like all kind of like sweaty and dirty, and their chests are showing.
Yeah, seriously.
It was weird. It was very weird.
Well, and the idea is that, like, from what I was looking at it as, is that, a lot of queer people, unfortunately, have to have fine chosen families, because they're kicked out of their homes. And in this case, you have, like, the home being basically destroyed by vampires. But, like, what I found was interesting about the ending of this film in particular was how in the 80s, you would see vampire films that would have queer subtext to it that would eventually like reassert the heteronormative status quo by the end of it. Fright Night, the vampires are vanquished and Charlie's no longer questioning his sexuality. Lost Boys, he's gets rid of the other people in his back. Near Dark is the same thing. Like all of these vampire movies that have sort of a queer subtext to it eventually come back to a status quo. But that doesn't happen here because the town is obliterated. And at the very end, Ben ends up killing his quote unquote sweetheart because she's a vampire, and she offers him, this could be us forever. We'll be together. And he's like, nah, I'm going to go chill with this 19-year-old boy. Like there's no turning back from this. This is a destruction of heteronormativity and an embrace of this now homosocial pairing that have decided to go on with their life.
Terry, can we just write a whole ass book about queer reading of Salem's Lot? Because I would read the shit out of it. It's so like I saw the queerness like in Straker and in Barlow, but like the way and in Mark too. I think I texted you. I was like, just say you like boys. Yeah. But it's so fascinating, like really looking at this film like that. I think it's just a queer movie, like you said, Terry. and a really scary movie. Like, I got scared watching this yesterday in my bedroom.
Yeah,
it creeped out is probably a better word for it, but yeah.
It's so atmospheric. It's so atmospheric.
Honestly, I think the vampires are really, really good in this. I love the glowing contact lenses that apparently were created for this movie.
Oh, shit.
They were apparently so uncomfortable that they could only be worn for 15 minutes, and then they had to have like a 30-minute eye rest in between using them. So going back to this movie, it immediately brought me back as a kid, seeing the piercing eyes and just them sort of glowing there. In particular, Mike sitting in the rocking chair.
That scene is so good. It's so scary.
I also like how the vampires, like, vampires are always described as pale, but they're like purple because it's like they're just dead corpses with the blood pooling under their skin. Like, it's just so much more creepy, and you see them more as zombie-like figures, and with like this just awful dead look. Not just bloodless, but like too much blood, if that makes sense. It's just like very
totally
off-putting. In a way that I appreciate. Like, again, I love me a nasty vampire who's gross. So, like, I love feral, nasty vampires. So this is a very welcome film in my life about, like, still human, but, like, pretty gross vampires.
I completely forgot what I was going to say. Oh, another thing that I like about this movie is just how claustrophobic it is. Because if you notice, there's always somebody that's looking at Ben, and where people always say, he mentioned something, yeah, I heard. It's like the whole town is just abuzz, just gossiping about him and watching what he's doing, and just kind of casually going into his room and looking through his things. And that's just,
yes,
it's just scary. It's very unnerving.
The scene where the woman who runs the boarding house and the local homeless guy, like,
what are you doing in here?
Nothing, Eve, nothing.
What's that?
Just a piece of paper, Eve, nothing on, just paper. You got a lot of scribbling here, too.
Run into his room and just read his story,
yeah.
And I'm just like, what the fuck is wrong with y'all? Like,
and even Susan just walks into his room when he's not there,
yes.
And like, just starts going through his stuff, and it's like, you guys are all right doing this?
Well, and also, like, they're told to be more discreet. Like, everyone knows you were up at the lake. Everyone knows you were doing this. You have to be more discreet. And I'm like, this seems like more sinister than just small town gossip. It's like Big Ben is watching you. Like, there's eyes everywhere.
Like, exactly. Like, we have nothing else better to do than to watch what our neighbors are doing. So, watch your step, basically.
Speaking of discreet, because, like, I was thinking, this dude is a grown-ass man, and this is a grown-ass woman. Why do they have to be fucking discreet? But can we talk about how he does not... So I looked it up, and the guy, the actor that plays Ben, David Soul, was 35 or 36 when this was filmed. He does not look 35 or 36. He looks like a decade or two older than that.
Everybody looked older back then.
Why is that?
I honest to God, I think it's because a lot more people smoked.
Oh.
And smoking just, like, aged you like crazy.
Because, like, I was looking at him, and I started, like, I went down, like, my podcast Google hole of, like, trying to find, like, well, Chris Evans, he's 39, and, like, all these people that are, like, in their 30s today that, like, would be playing that kind of character in a role like this, and I'm like, he does not look like he's 36 years old, and he literally was 36 when he filmed it.
I think like Gena said, I think people just take better care of themselves now. He probably drank a lot and smoked a lot of cigarettes. At least that seems like a safe assumption for a movie from the 70s.
Well, if you notice in one scene, they mentioned that Straker is supposed to be 55.
Oh my God, I forgot about that.
That's right.
Now, to be fair, James Mason himself was like 70 when he did this
I looked him up too, yeah.
It looked 70, so I don't know why. I don't know why they tried to say he was 55.
That's so funny.
Well, so Terry, how many vampiric townspeople out of 5 do you give Salem's Lot?
Ooh, that's kind of a loaded question because I think I love the beginning. I actually really enjoy the way that the movie kind of tackled the way that Stephen King would set up a host of characters and, like, create sort of like that mise en scene that kind of this American life that's going on, where everyone has like things that are happening, where like the real estate people are having an affair and she's married, and like I love all of that little tiny small town stuff that Stephen King nails so well, and I thought that it was adapted pretty well here. I do think that kind of the middle sort of drags a bit. And I actually lost a little bit of interest when it felt like, I guess, all the vampirism was like backloaded, and so it got to be a little too much watching it this time. Although I think the finale is really entertaining. So I don't really know how I rate this. I think I would give it maybe a 3 or 3.5.
Okay.
Out of, I think it's a little too long. I think 3 hours and 20 minutes is a bit long of a movie. I am curious to go. I would like to rewatch like the European cut that I apparently devoured as a kid over and over again to see the differences with that sort of like a little less than 2 hour plot and see how that would have held up. But yeah, I think 3 or 3.5 vampiric townspeople out of 5 for me. Okay. What about you, Mary Beth?
I'm gonna give it 4 vampiric townspeople. Okay. Even though I told you I was bored at the beginning, I really do like. Once it hit that first hour, I think the next 2 hours went by so fast for me. I was super invested in the world. I was really invested in the characters, and I mean, we all know I love a vampire. So when the vampires really started coming out and showing the way that these vampires work, I was just like in it. And then especially when they go into the house, like the very gothic, creepy, falling apart house.
Oh yeah.
I just, it really got my attention and sucked me in, to a point where I was like, this is actually pretty scary. I mean, again, creepy is a better vibe, but watching this as a kid, I would have been terrified. And I, again, love it when the vampire is kind of gross. And I think that this is a much more nihilistic film than you usually see. And I love that. I love that it just like doesn't like hold back in terms of killing children and killing family members and like really kind of cruel deaths, especially to Mark's parents. So
oh yeah,
I just really loved it. So I'm going to give it a 4. Gena, you have the final say. How many vampiric townspeople out of 5 do you give the Salem Slot?
I'm going to give it 4.5 vampiric townspeople.
Cool.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's just because I have a weird sort of nostalgia attached to it because I think that this, you know, I mentioned earlier that American Werewolf in London was the first horror movie I watched I really, really loved, but I think that this one made the first real impact on me as far as, you know, making me feel very, you know, uneasy and scared. So I think just for, you know, nostalgia gives that extra half a point more than anything, that half a townsperson more. I actually would like to see a longer version, believe it or not, but like I said, broken down into you know, a mini series, like Terry, you said, like The Outsider, structured like that. Because I think that there are such interesting little interludes that they had to leave out for, you know, for length of time, and also there's some sequences of the book that are really very gruesome.
Yes.
One that stands out to me is a baby gets bitten by a vampire.
Yes.
They kind of they mention it offhandedly in the movie, but in the book there's a whole scene in which the baby is basically discovered by its mother. And it's very unpleasant. And like, there's a scene in which, that's always stuck in my head as being, I would love to see a film version of this. And they did eventually do it in the 2004 version, but it didn't quite come out the way I imagined it, where like a school bus driver gets on a bus and they're like, the whole bus is filled with vampire children. And it sounds corny when I say it, but in the book it's genuinely creepy. And I would love to see just these odd little stories and more kind of how the town itself just sort of, you know, bad. It's got just, you know, and again, that's a very common theme in Stephen King stories, is how the whole, the very ground that the town is built on is just bad.
Yeah.
And you know, maybe it's not that you know, Barlow, you just kind of showed up at this town. He was always meant to be there. Because it's just, you know, they just, whatever is badness, you know, in the town, it's drawing him in. And I think to explore that a little more would be interesting. Of course, then you kind of run into being a little too much like it, but I think you could, you know, with a little work, you could separate the two pretty easily.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You know, one thing that I guess popped up in my head while I was watching this too is kind of like how you were talking, Mary Beth, about how long it takes a little bit to get there, is that everyone in the beginning is like, when is Barlow going to be here? And everybody's like, he's going to be here soon. It's almost like waiting for Barlow.
Nice.
Thank you.
You're off the podcast.
Thank you. Well, it's a good run, guys.
I think that's your PC resistance. You can end it now.
Yep.
There you go. I was like, is this going to work? I meant to say it in my rating, but yeah, here we go. Anyway.
I appreciate it and hate it at the same time.
Well, thank you so much, Gena, for joining us to talk about Waiting for Barlow. Where can our listeners find you, and what do you have coming up you'd like to share?
I am co-host of the Kill by Kill podcast. Some of our recent episodes have covered Blood Rage. We're also doing, we have an episode coming up devoted to Saw 4. That's our Saw's Giving episode. We also have a side project in which we are reviewing, episode by episode of Hannibal.
Yeah,
so cool.
That is our next, I believe that should be our next episode as of this date. I also write for The Spool. It's thespool.net. My recent articles have been a retrospective on the live action Grinch movie. If you really
my god,
want to...
I cannot wait to read it because I have a really weird fucking soft spot for that gross ass movie. So, okay.
Oh no, I'm sorry, I didn't like it.
Oh no. That's correct. I don't understand. I don't understand why I like it so much. I understand the shame in which I like Jim Carrey in a full green outfit, but at least I know myself.
That's true. And I'm also on Twitter under Porcelain72.
Cool.
Awesome.
So, listeners, you've heard from us, but we want to hear from you. What was your experience with Salem's Lot? You can send us an email at scarredforlifepodcast@gmail.com, or you can reach out to us directly on Twitter. I am at MB McAndrews.
I'm at Gailey Treffel.
And of course, don't forget to follow the podcast at Scarred Podcast.
And please don't forget to review, rate, and subscribe.
Thank you to Steve Arnold for our artwork. Thank you to Sean Keller for our music. And thank you to everyone for listening. Stay safe out there, but most importantly, stay creepy.
And until next time.
Won't somebody please think of the children? Won't somebody please think of the children? Somebody please think of the children!
As a person with a very deep voice, I'm hired all the time for advertising campaigns. But a deep voice doesn't sell B2B, and advertising on the wrong platform doesn't sell B2B either. That's why if you're a B2B marketer, you should use LinkedIn ads. LinkedIn has the targeting capabilities to help you reach the world's largest professional audience. That's right, over 70 million decision makers all in one place. All the big wigs and medium wigs. Also small wigs who are on the path to becoming big wigs. Okay, that's enough about wigs. LinkedIn ads allows you to focus on getting your B2B message to the right people. So, does that mean you should use ads on LinkedIn instead of hiring me, the man with the deepest voice in the world? Yes. Yes, it does. Get started today and see why LinkedIn is the place to be to be. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
What is The Briefing Room?
It's a behind-the-scenes look at how the criminal justice system works and the lives of the people within that system.
If you love true crime, well, these are the real people who do the job every day of making sure justice is served.
Hi, I'm Detective Dave.
I'm Detective Dan. Together we have decades of experience in local law enforcement, a profession that we think is often misunderstood.
So we're going to explore how to do it right, and we won't shy away from when it's done wrong. These are stories you'll hear nowhere else. Unique, frank, and unvarnished.
From the team that brought you Small Town Dicks, this is The Briefing Room. Episode 1 drops on August 30th. We'll meet you in the briefing room.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.